In the sun-scorched deserts of Morocco, Sultan Marzuq al-Rashid ruled with meticulous precision and a keen eye on order. His reign was marked by economic expansion, strict administration, and innovative methods to maintain compliance. Among his most notorious measures was a punishment that used the desert itself as an instrument of discipline. Guys, can you help me to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel? And it's my dream. Sorry for interruption, it's humble request. Let's jump into the video. Sultan Marzuq al-Rashid emerged from a minor branch of the Marinid dynasty, rising through steady alliances and effective tribal negotiation. His ascent was marked by careful consolidation of influence rather than sudden military victories. By the time he claimed the throne, he was regarded as a figure who could unify the scattered regions of the Western Maghreb. In his youth, Marzuq studied administrative customs from Andalusian scholars who had migrated into North Africa. These scholars emphasized record-keeping, agricultural reform, and structured taxation. Their influence shaped the ruler he would eventually become. Marzuq gained early recognition due to his disciplined management of caravan routes. He inspected taxation patterns personally and noted weaknesses in systems that relied on verbal reporting. This helped him build a reputation for precision and reliability among merchants. When he finally assumed power, he focused first on reorganizing the palace bureaucracy. He appointed clerks who could read multiple languages and insisted on written documentation for every financial transaction. This shift reduced corruption and allowed for predictable budgeting. His reign soon became associated with economic expansion. Marzuq cultivated agreements with desert tribes that controlled key passageways into the Sahara. These agreements enabled safer travel for traders, which in turn attracted foreign merchants seeking stable routes. The Sultan invested heavily in irrigation upgrades. Engineers constructed channels that supported agriculture in regions that had not been productive for decades. Grain yields gradually increased, offering the kingdom a more secure food supply. Marzuq also introduced a standardized measurement system for market transactions. Local disputes diminished because weights and scales became consistent across districts. Market inspectors were trained to enforce the standards daily. His administrative priorities extended to the mint. Coinage under Marzuq became known for its precise weight and clarity of inscription. These coins circulated widely and strengthened the kingdom's commercial identity. Diplomacy formed another pillar of his strategy. Marzuq negotiated treaties with nearby kingdoms by promoting predictable trade tariffs. These treaties reduced border conflicts and encouraged cultural exchange through shared caravans. He established a scholarly council that documented regional histories. Their task was to compile agricultural records, rainfall patterns, and tribal genealogies. These records informed future decisions and supported long-term planning. Marzuq invested in caravanserais along desert routes. These structures provided predictable rest points for traders and ensured regulated access to water supplies. Each caravanserai employed local guardians who maintained inventories and reported unauthorized activity. The Sultan paid attention to urban planning. Cities under his rule gained structured markets, defined administrative quarters, and regulated residential clusters. These arrangements improved sanitation and simplified tax collection. He emphasized military discipline without promoting expansionist campaigns. His army was structured mainly for border protection and internal regulation. Officers recorded equipment inventories and reported them to the treasury every season. Marzuq created a rotating inspection system for provincial governors. Each governor was required to present yearly reports of tax income, infrastructure projects, and legal cases. This oversight prevented long-term abuses of authority. The legal system underwent revisions under his guidance. Judges received clear procedural guidelines that standardized sentencing practices across districts. This regularity increased public confidence in the court system. Marzuq supported artisan guilds to increase domestic production. Metalworkers, leather tanners, and textile makers were organized into structured groups that reported directly to the market authority. Guild regulations balanced supply with demand and stabilized prices. The palace archives expanded significantly during his rule. Scribes documented every decree, trade, treaty, and administrative reform. This record-keeping strengthened the administrative memory of the state. He encouraged the introduction of mathematical and astronomical studies through visiting scholars. These studies supported improved navigation methods for caravans and helped regulate the agricultural calendar. Students trained under these scholars later assisted in mapping new trade routes. Marzuq developed a supply management office that monitored grain storage across the kingdom. Reserves were tracked seasonally, ensuring food distribution during poor harvests. This reduced the impact of localized shortages. The Sultan established a communication network using mounted couriers. Couriers carried sealed messages between provinces and provided weekly updates to the central administration. This enabled rapid responses to regional concerns. He invested in stone roads connecting coastal towns to inland markets. These roads lowered transport costs and reduced losses caused by sand erosion. Merchants viewed this infrastructure as a sign of long-term stability. Marzuq encouraged olive cultivation in regions suited to its growth. Local farmers were provided with seedlings and basic irrigation guidance. Olive oil production gradually increased and became a valuable export. The Sultan regulated access to desert wells. Guards documented water usage and ensured that caravans followed scheduled allotments. This prevented disputes and preserved resources for long-distance travel. Marzuq maintained strict separation between administrative spheres. Military officers, treasury officials, and provincial governors were expected to operate within defined limits. This reduced internal power struggles and preserved procedural clarity. The Sultan's palace functioned as a centralized hub of information. Scholars, merchants, and local officials visited regularly to present reports and request permissions. This open communication structure helped keep regional policies consistent. Marzuq initiated surveys of desert boundaries to prevent tribal conflicts. Surveyors recorded dune patterns, seasonal winds, and paths used by herders. These observations allowed authorities to mediate disputes based on documented evidence. He promoted regulated camel breeding programs to support caravan efficiency. Selected breeders recorded lineage, training progress, and load capacities. These programs strengthened the logistical capabilities of long-range travel. Marzuq introduced uniform taxation guidelines for imported luxury goods. Merchants now had predictable costs when transporting textiles, ceramics, or spices. This predictability made the kingdom an attractive trade destination. The Sultan fostered diplomatic marriages that linked ruling families across regional boundaries. These marriages stabilized alliances and strengthened the kingdom's political connections. His court became a recognized center for negotiation. He maintained clear protocols for palace ceremonies. Attendance lists, gift exchanges, and formal greetings followed documented guidelines. These protocols reinforced the hierarchy and reduced confusion during official events. Marzuq expanded the kingdom's observatories to track celestial movements. Observers recorded seasonal variations that informed agricultural planning. Their findings also supported timekeeping practices. Administrative training schools were founded to instruct young clerks. Students learned accounting, land assessment, and correspondence management. Graduates were placed in provincial offices to improve governance consistency. The Sultan encouraged regulated salt extraction in desert regions. Salt caravans became a steady source of income, contributing to a stable treasury. Extraction sites were documented to prevent unauthorized mining. Marzuq introduced census practices to track population changes. Provincial officials recorded household sizes, livestock counts, and labor availability. These figures assisted in tax planning and resource allocation. He constructed fortified way stations near regions prone to banditry. Soldiers monitored movement and kept logs of all caravans passing through. This increased safety strengthened long-distance commerce. Marzuq supported the establishment of manuscript workshops. Copyists produced textbooks, legal manuals, and historical records. These materials circulated among scholars and strengthened administrative knowledge. The Sultan ensured that desert tribes received structured rights in exchange for cooperation. Agreements documented grazing privileges, water access, and caravan protection duties. This arrangement reduced disputes between settled and nomadic populations. Marzuq's reign became known for its administrative regularity, economic consistency, and structured reforms. His policies emphasized documentation, predictable governance, and organized labor. These foundations shaped the environment in which later practices, including punitive methods, developed during the middle phase of Sultan Marzuq al-Rashid's rule. His administration expanded its focus from economic stability to internal discipline. As provincial reports increased, the Sultan sought consistent methods to address offenses that disrupted caravan routes or challenged state regulations. This environment shaped the introduction of the sand mirror punishment. The practice formed part of a broader legal restructuring. Officials were instructed to classify transgressions by scale, intent, and economic impact. The sand mirror punishment was designated for offenses that threatened public order or disrupted market stability. Its design emerged from consultations with desert scouts who understood the behavior of heat across dunes. They explained how polished surfaces amplified sunlight when positioned at precise angles. Their observations contributed to the technical setup of the punishment. The method involved burying offenders up to the neck in compacted sand. Around them, metal plates were arranged to reflect sunlight toward the exposed head and shoulders. These plates were angled according to the sun's movement to ensure continuous exposure during daylight. The purpose was administrative rather than symbolic. Marzuq's council aimed to create a consistent deterrent that required limited resources and could be applied in remote regions. The desert itself provided the conditions needed for the process. Provincial officers were trained to implement the method with regulated procedures. They were instructed on positioning, timing, and documentation. Each application required a written record noting the location, the offense, and the duration of exposure. The polished plates were standardized across districts. Artisans produced them according to measurements issued by the central mint. This standardization ensured predictable outcomes regardless of where the punishment was carried out. The process took place during peak daylight hours, usually beginning shortly after sunrise. Officers noted the progression of heat, intensity, and maintained distance to avoid disrupting the reflective layout. They monitored the subject's condition and reported compliance to higher authorities. Local communities rarely attended these procedures. The punishment was not designed for public display and was carried out in designated desert zones. These zones were chosen for their isolation and minimal disruption to trade routes. Water access was strictly controlled during the exposure period. Officers documented hydration patterns to ensure uniform enforcement. Guidelines required minimal water distribution prior to the procedure to maintain controlled conditions. At the end of the daylight cycle, officers removed the plates and cleared the sand around the subject. Medical attendants, usually trained in basic care, assessed the resulting injuries. Reports were forwarded to provincial courts to complete the official record. The punishment varied in duration depending on the severity of the offense. Lesser infractions were assigned shorter exposure periods, while more serious transgressions received full-day cycles. The variability allowed courts to apply proportional responses. Marzuq's administration treated the method as an instrument of order rather than retribution. Records show that it was applied mostly to individuals who disrupted caravan operations or falsified market measurements. These acts were viewed as threats to the kingdom's economic reliability. To prevent misuse, the Sultan issued strict oversight instructions. Governors were required to confirm each case before authorization. They also sent yearly summaries to the capital outlining the number of applications and the outcomes. Training programs for officers included environmental study. Recruits learned about sand density, sun trajectory, and wind patterns. This ensured accurate implementation and prevented inconsistent results between provinces. Metalworkers maintained the reflective plates through scheduled inspections. Plates were tested for clarity and durability. Any plate that failed inspection was replaced to maintain uniform standards. The procedure influenced further administrative reforms. The kingdom developed updated maps that marked designated punishment zones and safe routes around them. This mapping improved navigation for caravans and clarified legal boundaries. Provincial judges incorporated the punishment into detailed sentencing guidelines. These guidelines outlined when to apply the sand mirror method and when alternative penalties were more appropriate. Judges used these documents to maintain consistency across regions. Because the punishment relied on natural conditions, environmental monitoring became part of the process. Officers recorded temperature levels and seasonal variations. These records helped determine when conditions were suitable for application. The Sultan emphasized that the procedure should not interfere with trade operations. Routes near the designated zones were supervised to ensure uninterrupted travel. Caravans passing nearby received advance notice to avoid confusion. The sand mirror method also required cooperation from desert tribes. Agreements with tribal leaders specified shared responsibility in maintaining boundary markers and reporting unauthorized activity. These agreements were recorded and renewed periodically. Reports sent to the central administration cataloged the results of each application. The Sultan's scribes organized these documents by region, season, and offense category. This centralized archive later supported policy revisions. The procedure influenced the kingdom's metalworking sector. Artisans produced a consistent supply of polished plates to meet provincial demands. Workshops developed techniques for smoothing surfaces and strengthening edges. Administrative concerns included the possibility of overuse. Marzuq issued directives limiting the number of applications per district during a single season. These limits ensured that the punishment retained its regulatory purpose and did not become a standard response for minor issues. The kingdom's legal scholars analyzed the method within broader legal frameworks. They compared it to existing penalties, noting its reliance on environmental conditions rather than mechanical intervention. Their studies influenced future sentencing practices. Because the punishment depended on sunlight, officers adapted schedules during winter months. They documented reduced exposure periods and adjusted implementation to meet standard requirements. These adjustments were recorded for central review. Provinces with strong winds developed additional guidelines. Officers placed wind guards near the plates to prevent shifting sand from interfering with the reflective angles. These guards were lightweight and easy to transport across desert terrain. The Sultan's treasury monitored costs related to the method. Because the materials were durable and reusable, expenses remained low. This cost efficiency contributed to the method's continued use. Communication between districts improved as officers exchanged implementation reports. These exchanges helped standardize techniques and clarify procedural uncertainties. The Sultan encouraged such communication to maintain administrative uniformity. Court archives show that the punishment served as a corrective measure for offenses that risked long-term economic instability. By targeting specific categories of wrongdoing, the administration sought to reinforce consistent behavior among traders and officials. The method prompted updates to the kingdom's environmental studies. Scholars recorded data on heat absorption, reflective intensities, and seasonal desert patterns. Their work supported future administrative planning in areas unrelated to punishment. The sandmere practice also influenced training manuals issued to new officers. These manuals outlined step-by-step procedures, environmental assessments, and reporting formats. Manuals were updated regularly based on provincial feedback. Provincial leaders were required to inspect desert zones annually. They documented erosion patterns, shifting dunes, and changes in visibility. Their reports ensured that zones remained suitable for controlled procedures. Marzuq maintained oversight through periodic reviews of provincial correspondence. His attention to detail ensured that the punishment remained consistent with broader administrative goals. These reviews reinforced the importance of documentation. As the kingdom expanded its record-keeping, the sandmere method became one of many standardized practices used to regulate internal conduct. Its inclusion in legal codices reflected its integration into the administrative culture of the period. The method's long-term effect was the reinforcement of predictable legal consequences. Traders, officials, and local residents understood the categories of offenses that could trigger exposure to the desert's reflective heat. This awareness contributed to reduced violations in key economic sectors. The final phase of the sandmere procedure emphasized administrative oversight. Provincial governors were required to submit daily logs during implementation. Each log included the offender's name, offense, location, duration, and environmental conditions. Officers were trained to measure sunlight angles accurately using calibrated instruments. Adjustments were documented to ensure consistent intensity across all punishment sites. These records were forwarded to the capital for review. Medical attendants recorded injuries and recovery outcomes. Their reports included dehydration levels, skin abrasions, and overall health status. The Sultan used this information to determine whether modifications to duration or setup were necessary. Environmental data was compiled alongside legal records. Temperature readings, wind conditions, and sand density were noted systematically. This information helped officers predict optimal conditions for future applications. The reflective plates underwent maintenance cycles. Scratches or warping were repaired by designated artisans. Consistency in reflection was critical to the procedure's regulatory function. Coordination with desert tribes remained essential. Tribal leaders monitored the punishment zones and reported any interference with reflective setups. Agreements formalized their cooperation, and provided incentives for compliance. Communication channels between districts improved as standardized reporting allowed comparisons. Provincial administrators could identify discrepancies and suggest improvements. These exchanges reinforced the central government's authority over distant regions. Sultan Marzuq also commissioned studies on seasonal variability. Observers documented how summer heat and winter sunlight angles affected exposure. These findings refined procedural guidelines and ensured fairness across provinces. Courts integrated these reports into sentencing reviews. Judges evaluated whether implementation adhered to prescribed standards. Known compliance or errors could result in disciplinary measures for officers or governors. The Sand-Mir procedure became an enduring element of administrative culture. Beyond its immediate function, it demonstrated the kingdom's capacity for structured enforcement and centralized oversight. Over time, documentation of the method influenced legal scholars and historians. Manuals detailing procedures, environmental assessments, and case outcomes were preserved. These records provided a systematic understanding of state regulation during Marzuq's reign. The practice highlighted the integration of natural conditions into governance. Desert landscapes, sunlight, and reflective materials were used efficiently to enforce compliance, reflecting a unique approach to law enforcement. While the punishment's severity is evident from the records, its main legacy lies in administrative precision. It illustrates how Sultan Marzuq combined legal authority, environmental knowledge, and record-keeping to maintain order throughout the kingdom. Through careful oversight, documentation, and adaptation, the Sand-Mir method reinforced centralized control and ensured predictable consequences for violations. Its implementation exemplified the structured governance that characterized Marzuq al-Rashid's rule.